Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. Welcome. I'm Tom Dutta, your host. That's Tom Dutta like butter. I'm kind of bouncing in my chair today. Got some energy. I'm excited to have back Scott MacDonald, who will bring on from the green room in a moment. Scott's a Quiet Warrior. He's been inducted into the Quiet Warriors. He's a 3-time show participant, and he's back again to share something new. And let me tell you a little bit about Scott. I'm just reading it here off my notes. He has a successful career working on real estate projects around the world. He's served as a CEO at multiple companies. He's the author of several books and founder of MacDonald Scholars, a college scholarship program at several universities. And you'll see his stock ticker on the screen, his website. You'll be able to check him out there. Before I bring him on, I just want to say that the first time I met Scott, I had we really connected. In his first book, 2016, was Saving Investa. And behind that, he talked about the story of how he was called on to go into a firm to help turn it around. And that actually took him from America, where he lived, to another country, and had a major impact on his life. Not the most positive, but he did great work there. He wrote another book called Think Like a Dog, which is one of my favorites. You'll have to get that. It's about a rescue dog, Sadie, who sadly recently passed away. Amazing book. And then the last book we talked about, we had him on, was about education without debt, a big challenge in North America. My daughter's in university, and what we know about student debt. So he's back today, and I'm going to bring him on the screen right now. So Scott, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show.
Thanks, Tom. Great to be here.
It's great to have you back. Hey, what's that picture in the background there? I'm always curious about your studio.
Let me slide over, and maybe you can see a little bit more of it.
I'll full screen you for a minute.
Yeah. Okay. It's it's painted by an Australian Aboriginal person, and the Aboriginals in their paintings, and I picked this up when I was in Australia. There's a story, and they paint a story. In this, I met with the painter, and the story here is their grandfather used to do these walkabouts, and learn how to start a fire with a flint, and he would walk from tribe to tribe or group to group and teach them how to start a fire so they could cook. And so you can see the little black in the big here, wrong way. That's the match or whatever it is, and then you can see the red, the fire, and the flame, and so that's it. That's the story.
That's beautiful. Is it a oil, or what do you call is it an oil painting, or?
No, it's they use kind of natural paints. It's really acrylic, but it's the kind of natural paints you would make yourself, and it's dots. If you have a close up, you'd see all the little dots.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad to have you back, and I want to dig right in. We have something new that you've done, but I want to just set this up that you're a guy who's never retired. I know your professional work, but you're doing philanthropy. Thank you. But you've written a new book. Hold it up there. Just read us the title there, Scott. I'm going to full screen you again. Just read us out the title.
It's Legacy, an Ancestral Journey Through American History.
All right, everybody, you can see that now. I'm going to have some fun because, voila, there I have. This is my copy upside down there. There it is. And I'm going to show you the back of it. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to just open it to the preface. And thank you for sending it to me and signing it. Everybody, you want to get this book and get it signed by Scott. There's a quote up front: "Behold, the righteous live long in the earth, and in old age resign their breath. They and their offspring here are blessed. When done in life, they go to rest." One more thing I want to mention, that I'm going to ask you to talk about it. Usually there's dedications in books, and they're about people and things. This one says, "To my family." I'm just going to honor your family, your son, Andrew, your wife, Davida, grandchildren, Claire, James, Elise, son, Ross, and his wife, Kaylin. Then you've mentioned your mother, Bernice, and your father, Walter, and and two siblings, Judith, husband Bob, and a few more people, Margaret Welch and husband Norman, and then the last line is the one I wanted you to tell me about. And to my ancestors who came before and live within me. That sent chills. So tell us, why did you write this book, and what do you mean by that?
Well, the origin of this book was my curiosity about where I came from. My father died when I was very young, and so I never really knew his family.
How old was that?
I was 6 years old, and his parents had died prior. So my mother raised me, and in that generation, people that came up through the Great Depression, they were not interested in ancestry or history. They were interested in surviving in the day. So she really never talked about her family. And I met her parents. So I knew my grandparents, my maternal grandparents. But that's it. I had no idea. I asked my mom, who my ancestors were. And she said, oh, I think they were from Scotland. That's about it. So I decided to do some research, and I didn't really know anything about ancestry. And I did decades of research, frequently helped out by professional genealogists.
Yeah.
And I think we all are a product of those who came before us. Not only the DNA that we inherited, but clearly their experiences, their life, what they learned, they pass down to their children, and a lot of it gets passed down to who we are. So I think understanding who we are and why we are, it ties in quite a bit to those who came before us, who created who we are.
Yeah, everybody, teaching moments here. So Scott, I always ask the guests to write me why the narrative of the show fits the Quiet Warrior narrative. And you sent me back something that was compelling. You said something about apparently ancestry, or this kind of research is like the second most popular. Just remind me what you said to me there.
Yeah, when they do surveys as to popularity of hobbies.
Yeah.
In the last decade, ancestry research has popped up, and it's like number 2 right now. I think sports may be number 1. I forget, but it's now one of the most popular pastimes, avocations in North America.
That blew my mind. And what's interesting is so my story is my grandparents. I met my grandmother briefly. My grandfather, who was from India, my parents born in Fiji, as I told you before, Scott. I never met him. He passed before my dad did, before I was born. And I've had this yearning to find my roots back to India. Somewhere there's a village and things. My wife's Italian. And so you caught my attention. We've been seeing these ancestry ads or these ads for DNA or ancestry kits and things like that.
Right.
But until I got your book, I wasn't as intrigued. And now it's on my list of things to do. Let me go back to the back of the book, hold it up again and turn it over and just show us the back.
Oops.
Perfect. Now, everybody, I know we're just flashing it, and on the audio, you can't see it. Thanks, Scott. I'm just going to throw something out at you and ask you to talk about it. On the back cover, there's, hope I corrected me if I'm wrong, 53 family genealogies, 4 Native American tribes. Tell us what's that all about? That's a lot. I mean, I thought you were just you and your small family.
Yeah. So when you start digging into the ancestry,
yeah,
you go down several trees. We are a product. My ancestors came to the United States, or to, let's call it America. The United States didn't exist in the early 1600s. And so in the ensuing 400 years, there's about 1 million direct ancestors. If you just do 2 times 2 every 20 years or so. So I have about 1 million ancestors from the time the first MacDonald. Now that million includes dozens and dozens of families, right?
Yeah.
Everyone was named MacDonald. So as I dug into who the ancestors were, and of the million, I got to about 20,000, which is a lot, but but then all these families I started, and some of the families are really interesting. And so I tried to profile some of the families that are in that ancestral tree.
Yeah.
And where they came from and why they came and what happened when they got here. And so there's 53 different families where there's actually a family tree included, and 4 Native American tribes.
It's quite something. I'm just going to hold the book up from my end here. That page, everybody, it just says the Pilgrims, but each chapter, maybe you can just tell us how you've laid this out. I'll give it back to you in a minute, but I want you to tell us how you've laid this out, the format of it. And secondly, just paint a picture, Scott. You said you got 20,000 out of a million. How, like, is that, so you go to a database and do you get a list? Like, so just tell us a little bit more about that.
It's complicated. So you start with you and your family and your parents and your grandparents, and it goes from there. You start at the beginning and build back, because that's what you know. And then most people, I believe, use Ancestry.com as kind of a starter, because it's user friendly. And
you pay for that?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
Yeah. But what I would say is maybe half the information on there is wrong. So you can't just accept what's there, because what happens is people copy and paste a lot of things. So if someone puts a wrong piece of information, it gets replicated over and over and over again. So you can't just accept that. You have to dig into it. And in digging into it, you come up with other families and other situations. And when I hit a stumbling block, which was common and frequent, I would hire a professional. And there's professional, for example, I had some ancestors in early Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New England, and I was having trouble connecting them.
Yeah.
And I hired someone who specializes in that area. And then they know where the courthouses are, they know where the underlying documents are, and they can do the research on site.
What would that person be called? I'm just fascinated by this. If somebody was to look to hire somebody like that, do they, like, how do you find someone like that? Do they have a title? Do they have a job? Or
they're a professional genealogist, and there is you can Google it, and there's a society, I think it's the American Genealogy Society, which lists professionals that they kind of have confidence in.
Interesting. You actually answered my other question. Everybody, more teaching moments. We're talking to Scott MacDonald, multiple author, also a Quiet Warrior. He's back again, and we're talking about his book Legacy, An Ancestral Journey. And so, what's one of the most notable families off the back of the book, or however you would just tell us about one that sort of like an aha moment where you might have gone really, and might have really intrigued you?
Oh, well, I'll tell you one that was a big surprise to me. I think everyone's heard of the Indian Native American Pocahontas, right? The Disney movie and everything else.
Yeah.
So I had some early ancestors that were at Jamestown, and the Powhatan tribe was the dominant tribe, and Pocahontas was the name given the chief's one of his daughters. That wasn't her real name, but the settlers had to call her something, so they called her Pocahontas, and she's famous for having saved John Smith at Jamestown and all that.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that apparently she had 2 children, and her daughter had a daughter subsequently, and then that daughter married a settler, Mies, who is in my ancestry tree. So go figure. Yeah.
And was there any political figures, anybody of note? I mean, MacDonald, obviously, presidents, things like that, but anything there?
You know, it's there are relatives, but I've focused on direct descendants. For example, Thomas Jefferson, the president, is a relative, but he's not a grandfather or great grandfather. He's not a direct.
Okay.
Most of my ancestors were active, and a lot of them were prominent, but they weren't the absolute. They weren't. John Adams and John Quincy Adams were relatives, but indirect, not direct.
Yeah, interesting. I'm just going to read everybody. I'm just going to put the book online on the screen here. By the way, everybody, one of the things I'm going to recommend, and I always do this for great authors, is find this book. We'll tell you where to get it, but please take a look at it and post a review on Amazon, Goodreads.com. That's how writers' work gets known, and I treasure this work that Scott sent. It's fascinating. On page 2, it says, "My research on my ancestry began in earnest more than 10 years ago. At first, I had little information about my past. My father died as a young man, as you told us. My mother left only a dictation about her memories. The process of tracing my lineage was a long process with many dead ends, wrong turns, misinformation. There are almost certainly some mistakes hidden among the many names," and it goes on and on about that. And I wanted to ask you, they say that, Scott, or at least I believe this, we're all connected by threads in our stories. Was there a common thread that you found across all this research that is sort of like one of those things you said, before I wrote this book, I was seeking and searching for the truth or for something? Was there something that you found in this that changed you? And what was it?
That's a really good question. I wasn't searching for anything other than who I came to be and who my ancestors were that contributed to that. But what I learned in tracing the ancestors, and then once you identify them in a time and a place,
Yeah.
why did they come, and what was going on? So it became a focus on history, both European history, which led all these immigrants to come. They came, in my case, all from Europe, and what was happening in America to get them to come, and once they were here, what was happening. So it's really a history book. It's vignettes of American history through the eyes of ancestors, and that became fascinating for me to revisit American history, but through the eyes of people that lived it.
I think it's very cool. What was your reaction from your family, your siblings, your children?
Well, I'll tell you. So I first did the ancestry research, and I shared it with my 2 children. And their reaction was, "It's interesting, but it's actually kind of boring." Just a bunch of charts and so on. This guy had 12 kids, and so that got my attention. And then I spent a few years doing a lot of history research and reading history books, and weaving in American history into the ancestry, and that gave it a much different character. And so there's a lot of historical events that I never heard about. I mean, there are some main ones like the Battle of Bunker Hill and the Civil War, but then there's just a lot of interesting things that are historical facts and historical.
Well, try to remember, or just pull out one of those interesting facts if you can.
Okay, so in the Revolutionary War, George Washington was on the losing end of almost all the early battles. I mean, he won one battle at Trenton, but otherwise he was getting his tail beat, and the citizens thought the war was going to end soon, and had given up hope, and he was having trouble holding his troops, and so he decided to send a couple hundred men up to New York and attack this British fortress, which looked like it was impregnable. It just they had cannons everywhere. You had to climb a mountain, and I never heard of this place. Lo and behold, they were successful, and 200 patriots took almost 700 British prisoners and won a major battle in the war that I never heard of. And the bravery, I mean, they were thought to be a suicide squad. No one expected to live, but they were committed. And one of my ancestors was in that party. That's how I know about it.
Wow.
So that's one. Another thing, in New England, in the 1675, there was a war I never heard about. It is the most deadly war in American history. in terms of the percentage of population that died, this
Yeah.
beats Civil War. It beats all the wars. It was called King Philip's War. Never heard of it. A Native American chief went to war with the settlers, and a war went on for a few years, and thousands of people were killed. Settlers ultimately prevailed, but the cost was huge. And I had ancestors that were in the middle of that.
That's amazing. There's I'm deep into some things now, but I think last time I talked to you, we talked about how I had a brain injury in 2018, Scott, and through the last 4 or 5 years, I've really taken an interest in neuroscience. And one of the things I've learned about is neurotransmitters, the chemicals created by the brain. And, the common ones we hear about are serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine. But, people love to learn. They have a thirst for knowledge because the brain releases dopamine in anticipation of the reward. So I can only imagine, as you're researching this book, that it must have been exciting, because I know you did it a long time, but did you ever, did you feel that, like, oh, what am I going to learn next, or what's the next door that's going to open?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I kept finding things that were out there. They're known facts, but I didn't know. You know, the national anthem of the United States, which is now called the Star Spangled Banner.
Yes.
Some of my ancestors were involved in War of 1812 in that incident. So yeah, I knew it was written, and I knew, but I had no idea that it was written by a lawyer from Georgetown who was representing a client who just
No kidding.
witnessed the thing because his client was being held by the British on a ship. So who would have thought that?
Who would have thought? I mean, I had no idea. Now we've just learned something unique from you. How did you organize the data? I'm very detail oriented because I'm an author too, but you said a long time, so it was a period of years. How did you organize your data? Did you use computer, handwrite a lot of stuff?
All of the above.
Yeah.
I had a lot of files, a lot of paper files,
Yeah.
and then I write on the computer, and I had documents on the computer. Some documents only come in paper. So I bought a lot of books. One of the nice things that's happened in the last decade is Google has gone and found a lot of books that were out of print and copied them and made them available online. So there are a lot of history books, about this family or that family that nobody ever knew about, other than maybe the family, that are able to access. And then prior to me, other genealogists, people wrote books, like in 1920, or about the Ancestry birthday party in 1840, and you have all this information floating around, and you have to pull it together and place the ancestors. And so it's kind of a fascinating investigation. It's unending. It goes on forever because there's more stuff out there. But at one point I said, okay, I need to just write it in a cohesive book.
Yeah.
And I can keep doing it later.
So hold it up again, and then I'm going to ask you a question about the cover. Just show us the cover there. Put it in the middle. There you go. Yeah. Why that picture of that ship?
That ship is the Mayflower.
Okay.
So that is the Mayflower left England in 1620, I think.
Yeah.
And landed in what's now Massachusetts. And I had an ancestor on that ship, and that gave rise to the founding and development of New England.
Wow.
And then I had someone color it because it was kind of boring in black and white.
Yeah, it's everybody, we're dueling books here. It's so fascinating. I'm being teasing everyone here. I got a nice little book that's signed by Scott. Yeah, you got to get one of these. But it's beautiful cover. It looks like watercolor, but it's nicely illustrated. It really was intriguing to get this book. And everybody, again, we're talking to Scott MacDonald, who is the author of multiple books. This one's called Legacy: An Ancestral Journey Through American History. You live in California right now, right?
Yeah, I do.
And you were born where?
Oh, I've had a long journey. I was born in Berwyn, Illinois, outside Chicago, and I grew up in Chicago. And then I've lived I lived in the Midwest. I moved to the East Coast, lived in Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Annapolis, Maryland.
Yeah.
Moved out to California, moved to Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
Lived in London, lived in Sydney. Now I'm settled. San Diego.
All right. I love San Diego. We talked about Scott's parents passing at age 6. Sorry about that early loss. Kind of thinking about my mom now, Scott, because I think my mom lost both her parents around the age of 12. And we know about the significance of that, especially for nurturing psychological. And I keep going back to why writing the book. And I'm not projecting on this, but if I'm in your shoes, I really believe that unconsciously we have this thirst for belonging, for knowing who we really are. And I kind of still have that because of my lifeline. I think it's really awesome that you did this work and you have found your story. It's fascinating. One more question about the book, and then we'll talk about a couple other things, and then we'll wrap up here. If I throw 3 words at you, and think, feel, and do. So, what would you like people to think when they read this book? What do you think people are thinking when they read the book? How would you like them to feel, or what do you think they're going to feel? And then after, is there a call to action or something you want people to do?
Okay, so I guess we'll start with think. I think understanding vignettes of American history, which they are probably unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
Even historians, I think, will probably find a couple factors in this, couple stories in the book that they had no idea existed, because some of these stories come out of little known books that families wrote and quotes. And so I think one is a broader appreciation and understanding of American history.
Yeah.
Feel, I think the ancestry aspect of it, how families come over. I mean, if your name is Ford in America, you probably descended from a kid that was kidnapped on the docks in England and brought over and raised by a minister in Virginia. And he grew up and did well, and wound up being the founder of one of the bigger families in America.
Yeah.
So feel the ancestry, feel the people that live within you, and understand what gave rise to their difficult experiences. And they all had challenging experiences to survive and to get here. And the survivors are what created us. And kind of call to action, that was the third one, or what to do. If people are interested in who they are, I would encourage them to start looking into their family ancestry and put their family members in a historical context. Why did they come here? Why did one of the ancestors immigrate from Scotland after his family was in this particular town for 700 years? What gave rise to that? So that becomes a fascinating historical investigation.
Oh, that's awesome. Everybody think, feel, and do. Again, Scott MacDonald, author of Legacy: An Ancestral Journey Through American History. I like that because it goes back to what I've always believed in, is we're connected by these threads. And I like that. Why did these people come here? It's fascinating. Every immigrant I meet or person, member of my family, has their own little story. Pretty awesome. What's the weirdest thing you might have learned when you were doing your research, or anything like that was like you went, what?
Well, so as I dug into things, some things became clear, that history is written by men, and it's written about men.
Yeah.
And there is very little written by women or about women, because women were supposed to have 12 kids, run the farm, manage everything, and they had no time to do anything else of any significance. So I decided to take a look at women in colonial America and see the little bit of information, what I could find out, and came across a lot of really fascinating stories. There was one in the Revolutionary War. There was a woman, Nancy. I'll think of her name in a second. Anyhow, so she's at home, she's cooking, and some loyalists come in. And barge in, put a gun to her head, and say, "Make us a turkey, and we want your wine," and invite themselves to dinner. And so she sends her daughter out to the well, and her daughter blows a horn and lets people know that the loyalists are there. And she stacks their guns off to a side. And after they've had a few drinks, they realize that what she's doing, her daughter is going out for help. And she pulls one of the guns and she said, "You move, you're dead." Now, this is a colonial woman. And he didn't believe her, and she shot him dead.
Oh my goodness.
The second guy gets up and she shoots him. So then the other four say, "We're not moving." So then they come and they collect these the other loyalists, and they're gonna put them on trial. And she said, "No, just hang them." So they hung him. And so this is a story that I think was quoted in history. Nancy Hart was her name.
Okay.
As a tough, but nobody knew for sure it was true until 100 years later. They're building a railroad and they're doing excavation, and they find 6 bodies who have been hung, and they've been in the dirt 100 years.
That is, my goodness, that is fascinating. That is a motivation enough to get to do my own ads. So what a story. That could be a movie that's made on that one. So basically what you're telling us is somewhere in your genes you're a serial killer.
No, but there are multiple stories like that.
Yeah.
That's one of probably 50 different stories which I was unfamiliar with when I started.
I think that's pretty amazing. Hey, Scott, we'll let you at the end tell everybody where to get the book, but as we got a couple minutes here, how's the scholarship program going? Everybody, I mentioned Scott's written a book on the student debt issue in America, and then you're a philanthropist, which is amazing. How's that going?
Yeah, the scholarship program is doing really well. It's at 6 universities. We have about 100 kids enrolled, kids that otherwise could not afford to go to school, and they're getting part of their tuition paid, and we marry it with other sources of funds. So they will graduate from college with very little debt. And I'm pretty happy with that, and the schools are working really hard to expand the program. At the federal level, I keep hoping that Congress in the U.S. will address the student debt issue, and they won't. And so President Biden has just done a few things, but it doesn't address the problem. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that college costs too much money.
Yeah.
And kids from families that don't have a lot of money have to use debt to get their college degree. And that's the problem. And nobody is addressing it. And it's very frustrating. And I have in the book 3 pages of recommendations as to how to address this. But
yeah,
it's politically, everything is confrontational now and nothing's happening.
Yeah, everybody, that book, we'll put in the show notes, all of his body of works on his website, but the Education Without Debt, it's worth a read. We've got similar issues, obviously, in Canada here, and we won't get into politics, but, when you start seeing the world the way it is right now, and you think about Canada too, like countries that are funding to support a country like Ukraine and 87 billion, you sort of step back and look at priorities, and you think about, that's taxpayer money, and then we have a debt crisis, and let's not go there. I really am honored to have had you on the show. Let's move to giving you the last word about. Tell us anything you want as we close. Oh, actually, no. Let's do this. I just thought about this. I'm putting you on the spot here. I want you to use this video as an opportunity for marketing your book, and people love it when authors read. Can you just pull a paragraph out of your book, even if it's something out of the early part, just anything at all? I probably am putting you on the spot, but hey, that's my show. But yeah, just we're gonna full screen you for a minute, but just a minute.
Okay, hang on a second.
Yeah, no problem. Everybody, while Scott's doing that, what we'll be doing is releasing this as an international podcast. We're around the world now in something like 19 countries. We'll be creating a YouTube premiere video. It really helps if you hit the subscribe button. If you're watching me on YouTube, we're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter right now live. That helps us build the audience and get more attention for stories like this. And we're getting ready for an author to read to us. Go ahead.
Okay, and here is the story of Edward Milstead. Edward Milstead and his family came from Brotherton in the county of Kent, England. He was born in 1656. Like most of England, in the mid-1600s, Brotherton's poor people had few possessions and little food. When Edward was a teenager, he was arrested for theft and convicted of robbing 2 houses. From one house, he stole money, and from the other house, he stole food. Upon being found guilty by a jury, Edward appealed to an Anglican priest for intervention and was, quote, reprieved under the condition of transport, meaning he was deported. Edward arrived in Maryland in 1674 at the age of 18. He was indentured as a shoemaker to William Chandler of Charles County, Maryland, for the term of 5 years. After earning his freedom in 1680, he married Susanna Clark around 1685, and later leased a 50-acre tract of land and became a farmer, raising primarily tobacco. His farming was successful, and he was able to lease and purchase other tracts over time. It goes on to say, Edward had at least 2 indentured servants of his own during this time in Maryland, which was a nice turnabout for him. So this is a guy that went from total poverty and jail to actually
amazing
owning land and having servants.
All right. Well, thank you for letting me have you read to us live. I felt like putting my head on my pillow and going like Grandpa reading to me. Fascinating information. And everybody, you want to get this book, please do me a favor and give it a rating. Post it on Amazon, Goodreads. Scott will get a book out to you. Scott, last word to you.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Tom. I love your show. And I hope people enjoy the book and learn something from it, and maybe it stimulates them to do some of their own research and investigation.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, everybody. Well, find that true passion like you see Scott did there and live life with purpose. Live the life that you deserve and desire. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca